Hello, everybody. Happy Sunday. Welcome to Everything is Energy. Welcome to the weekly astrology forecast for the week of April 5th to April 11th, 2025. This week's theme is from feeling into action, and we're reigniting forward movement. And this week really marks a shift from emotional integration into a little bit more, I would say, personal, decisive movement. And, we begin with the need for recalibration this week, and then we balance expansion and restraint. And then we move towards a powerful turning point because Mars is entering into Aries on April 9th. And, where Mars in Pisces has asked us to feel, to listen, and to move intuitively, Mars in Aries is going to invite us to take action. So let's go ahead and just start with today, Sunday, April 5th. We have the Sun square Jupiter this evening at around 6:30 p.m. This is about careful expansion. Expansion, but there's this need for discernment because the Sun is also in Aries. I mentioned there's a lot of Aries energy in the April forecast. Squaring Jupiter in Cancer is going to give us this kind of squaring is tension, and the tension is between our personal desires, Aries, and our emotional needs, our psychological needs, our human needs for security. So we may feel enthusiastic, we may feel ready to jump into something. We may also feel pulled in several different directions. Um, it's worth noting that this is not a no. This is a refinement of yes. So one of the questions that we can ask ourselves on Sunday and throughout the week is this simply exciting or is it aligned? And feel the difference between that, because if it's aligned, there is this sense of purpose and momentum and enthusiasm. That if it's just simply exciting, let's pause and wait for the alignment. We're talking about moving with flows of energy now more than ever as we upgrade our understanding of who we are and how massively powerful creative being, what massively powerful creative beings we are. Let's turn the page to Monday. That's April 6th. And this is where our heart and our path align. We have a couple aspects. The first is close to 5:30 in the morning. That's going to be Venus is going to be sextiling the North Node. Sextile is a flow of energy. This is a really beautiful alignment, although it might be more about subtle energy than it is about, real 3D apparency. Venus is in Taurus right now, and this is connecting flowing energy with the North Node. The North Node is in Pisces right now. And this suggests that what feels nourishing may also move us forward. So this is interesting because coming off the heels of the excitement versus aligned momentum and this kind of need to act on Sunday, here we have this sense of, if we were wondering, well, how do I know if it's aligned? Well, it feels nourishing. It feels joyful. It feels substantive. It feels rooted while it moves forward. So here I would say, pay attention to what feels easy, what feels supportive, not easy, but just flowing. And what feels just kind of quietly, intuitively for yourself, right? Destiny does not always feel intense. Sometimes destiny feels simply like relief or upgrading our emotion. And the second aspect that's happening on Monday happens around 11 p.m. And that is that the sun is quintiling Pluto. This is cool. If you know me, you know I love aspects of Pluto. This is about subtle empowerment because Pluto works with subtle energy. And this aspect supports like really intentional shifts, not forced shifts, but chosen shifts. And so we may, towards the end of the day on Monday, just feel this quiet sense of strengthening within ourselves, strengthening who we are and what our truth is, having clarity about that. Let's get to moving on to Tuesday. Tuesday is April 7th, And here we only have one aspect, but this is really about depth of thought. We have Mercury semi-square to Pluto, and that's around 10 a.m. And here, this is inviting our mental body to go beneath the surface. And so we may notice a certain kind more intensity, or really it's a desire to understand something fully, where it's like there's this surface level of understanding, and maybe often it's kind of like what we're told or what we know or what's commonly known. And then there's this sense of like, not the bottom dropping out, but this sense of understanding that there's something beneath the surface. So this means our conversations, our communications, whether they are using words or using energy or using our vibration or our tone or whatever we're using to communicate, there's more power there. I don't want to say wait, but I do want to say, be careful of overanalyzing also here today. Today's a day to let insight, the things that we intuitively feel transform us, not to let our seeking the depths overwhelm us. And so here again, I'm going to state about this idea of keeping ourselves rooted, keeping ourselves in alignment, staying connected to our center. Mercury squaring Pluto, that subtle friction gives us an opportunity for an upgrade in our understanding and our execution of our communication. On Wednesday, April 8th, today's a day of innovative action. We have Mars sextiling Uranus around noon. And this is a beautiful time for inspired movement. Mars at this juncture is in super, super, super duper late Pisces. And this is connecting with Uranus at the anaretic degree of Taurus. And so this is interesting because this is offering intuitive action, but I mentioned that they're both at the latter degrees of these signs. So, let's think about making sure that this comes from a space of wisdom. There's a sense that we could find creative solutions here today. Maybe even, movement that happens that's unexpected, but also aligned. There might be something that happens on Wednesday that allows forward momentum that comes from somewhere other than where we're expecting it to come. And so, Uranus is the lightning bolt of change. This is not impulsive action. This is about intelligent, embodied change. So, if you feel ready to shift something, Mars wants us to do it super duper duper fast. Mars at the anaretic degree of Pisces is really asking us to take stock and to do it gently as well as decisively. So this brings us to the major shift that kind of permeates this week. Mars is entering into Aries on Thursday, April 9th. So this is potentially one of the more important shifts of the week. Mars returns to its home in the sign of Aries, and this is where it's strong, this is where it's direct, this is where it's action oriented. This energy shifting from Pisces into Aries is a noticeable shift. We know this because we just had, Saturn and Neptune leave Pisces and move into Aries. And so here, we might feel a little bit more clarity coming through, a little bit more motivation coming through. We'll definitely feel a little bit more willingness to take action versus just sit around. Not sit around, but that's what Aries would call it, sitting around. So what Pisces would say was that was necessary emotional processing, and indeed it was, and it is. But this is a time, this juncture span of time when Mars is in Aries. Early Aries is about this, just there's this freshness, there's this newness, there's this childlike innocence. It doesn't mean naive, it means unburdened by the shoulds and what we know, what we think should be. This is about, movement that becomes natural. And, it's important to remember that action is most powerful when it's aligned. So we're not just taking action willy-nilly because we're just jumping out of our skin. We got to go do something. We would be good to meditate on it and to make sure it is aligned. The question might be, what am I ready to move toward with clarity? And small steps are as powerful as big steps. The ripple effect is indeed a thing. So that's, That's Thursday. Friday, we have a day of just integration and momentum, which is interesting because, which also speaks to the fact that that shift in Mars into Aries is a big deal. Um, the counterpart of that is things could get a little hot if, and I don't think we need to worry about that, but 0 degrees of Aries, Mars in Aries. There's also, if one is ungrounded, the idea is like I was saying, of just I'm crawling out of my skin, I gotta do something. That's the shadow aspect. The empowered aspect is sitting with what does feel true, speaking our truth, acting in alignment with our truth, and knowing that now is the time that we are supported, the energy's flowing. So of course by Friday, if that was the case on Thursday, that's still afoot and it's going to be afoot for a while. But when there's no major aspects in a day. And actually, we have 2 days of no major aspects. We have Friday and Saturday. This kind of signals integration. This lets us kind of feel the surge of Mars into Aries and let it kind of, this is a day for us to let it settle into our body. But movement is available, but I would also offer that timing and pacing and energy flow still absolutely definitely matter. And so that carries into Saturday the 11th. We're still in this sort of steady forward motion, but here I would offer the tone is more of quiet continuation, because we're not seeking the loudest person doesn't necessarily by any stretch always win. If we're talking about subtle energy, and we know, I love to remind us that the outer planets always win. When we're in the 3D world, this physical world, we're almost like fixated on the personal planets, those inner planets, because Mercury affects our phone, and Venus and Mars affect our love life. And there's so many things that we kind of cling to in this world, but this outer planets and subtle energy are things that for most of humanity, we're relatively unacquainted with. But that's the energy that's carrying this intergenerational shift of all the outer planets changing signs. So when I talk about quiet continuation, Mars is now fully into Aries and the system is just beginning to adjust here. So this is a day for, again, spending some quiet time and then taking some simple action or even just following through on something. Um, Staying grounded while we step into the momentum. And I just want to, also just reiterate that you don't need to do everything. That the subtle, tiny steps are as powerful as the big steps. This is a really good time to just, even if it's setting an intention or writing a note or making a phone call or spending some time visualizing, this is a really good, the latter part of the week is a really good time to just simply begin. So to put a recap on this week, we began with expansion and discernment. Sun and Jupiter. We move into heart aligned direction with Venus in the North Node. Mercury and Pluto aspects are kind of opening the depths of our mental body. And then we get this inspired movement with Mars and Uranus. And then we get Mars into Aries, which lasts the last 3 days of this week. So we're kind of moving from feeling into knowing what is true, into taking action. And that's a really neat trajectory, right? Which we are so sensitive, and our sensitivity is our superpower. So if we honor what we're feeling and honor what we're intuiting and spend time unpacking that and figuring out how that interfaces with our truth, then we take action. So it's not only what do I feel, but it's what am I ready to do? All right, have a blessed week. I will see you for the meditation next. Take care, guys.